Friends, welcome back to this second session, second day of the session organized by ACA, Central Calcutta Chartered Accountant Study Circle and Direct Tax Professional Association on the topic of complex practical aspect of anti-money laundering law, its interplay with income tax law, role of CAs in handling the same. Friends, we would like to inform that we had a very good session yesterday morning, and today we are continuing with the same. And we are also live on Facebook on the channel on our Facebook page www.fb.com/ACA Kolkata. So, without any further delay, I would request Rajesh ji to kindly introduce the speaker and then take the session forward. Rajesh ji.
Thank you, Vivek. Good evening and a warm welcome, Mr. Taneja, Mr. Das, and other dignitaries. The subject for discussion today, PMLA, is a very complex and important law. To my understanding, the government initially brought this law to prevent the laundering of proceeds of the crime, and it had limited application. But now, in the practical field, each financial crime, irrespective of its coverage in the schedule offences, it is being attempted to be covered under PMLA. Hence, all of us need to understand the law, and today we have Mr. Taneja to make us understand about the intricacies of this law. With the subject introduction, I have once again Mr. Taneja for his deliberation this webinar. Thank you all, and over to Mr. Before I hand over to Mr. Sandeep Savaria, I introduce Mr. Das.
Hi, Rajesh ji, boliye.
Yes, Mr. Das, Dr. Mr. Das, a formal once minute.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Arun Das, a former IRS officer. Mr. Arun Das, a former IRS officer who was former acting chairman and member of the Appellate Tribunal under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. He is currently a practicing advocate at Delhi. He was a former DG of International Taxation, and his wide experience in policy making in the government, where he worked nearly 42 years. I welcome to Mr. Dr. Das. Thank you. And now I am hand over to Mr. Sundar Savaria to offer.
Requesting Mr. Das to please, sir, give your opinion on the today's session for 5 to 10 minutes. Please give your views on this.
Thank you very much. I am really grateful to you, all of you, my friends from Calcutta. As it was known when I first joined way back in the year 1977 in Calcutta. Now it has become Kolkata in the meanwhile. So, very much. The subject of money laundering, anti-money laundering law is of this millennium. Like money laundering law, anti-money laundering law, Benami law, black money law are evolving laws. So more often that you hear about it is always better, because every day something or other, some changes take place. And I'm happy that my young friend, Mr. Ashwini Taneja, former ITAT member, is addressing at length on the subject. He is a top counsel both on Benami and anti-money laundering law in Delhi. And I'm sure all of you will benefit from what he is going to say. So if there is anything anywhere to supplement or at question answer stage, I am available to all of you. I'll tell you a most recent happening you might have heard or read in the newspapers or TV, that former Jharkhand minister Anuj Ekka last Monday was jailed for 7 years for money laundering. And 23 crores of his assets were confiscated. All these things started in the year 2008. It took 12 years, long time, for matter to conclude at the trial stage. Special court finished it. Now it will go to a high court, this thing, but he's already in jail. 7 of his relatives, including his wife, children, brother, all are in jail. So the main perpetrator, Madhu Koda, it started with a pittance, a few less than 100 crores, then it became 160 crores. Now it is ED is on the train of nearly 3,000 odd crores. So my purpose of saying this is that this is a law that was required given the requirement of modern times and the fact that money laundering is becoming a real problem. I was there in a TPL wing of CBDT way back in 1997 when this exercise for drafting the law started. And it took nearly 8 years for law to become implemented. Though it was passed in 2002, it took a few more years to be implemented. Even for passing, there was lots of resistance, lots of problem. While there is a legitimacy about anti-money laundering law, but the way it has been done, it is really something to ponder about. What it is? It is way draconian in nature. It can bring a raid to somebody's home, put him in jail, levy fines, huge fines. Anuseka was fined something like 1 crore or a couple of crores, something like that, besides confiscation. So attach and confiscate the property. Even the property, it is seeking to even the property inherited from from somebody's grandfather, they are prepared to attach. So, but once they do it, the legal process takes over, cumbersome legal process and twin legal process, not twin, 3 types. One is the scheduled offense trial, second is money laundering trial, third is attachment related cases. This means a hell of a lot of a legal headache, trouble, expenses, and long suffering. And the law is way loaded against the accused. So that is why, and the CS being in the front line of anti-money laundering campaign, I would suggest that everybody in everything that you do due diligence. For your personal thing, for your client thing, for during the audit. Whether you personally buy a thing or sell something, you make due diligence. Lest you are not buying a laundered property. At least in the sell deed or purchase deed and contract, have a clause about that. At least you will be put in a position of a bona fide buyer. Then whether you give loan, take loan, ensure that a loan is taken and used for the purpose for which it is taken. Otherwise, it will become proceeds of crime. Both taking, giving loan requires due diligence. Even while you are giving a contract, giving a guarantee, preparing a guarantee, even a third-party contract, everywhere a little more care will save future trouble. So, and don't ever get anybody's check to be deposited in your account without due diligence. Don't think that merely because it is an account paycheck, it is a shield against any claim of money laundering. Perfectly good money from banking channel can be proceeds of a crime, whether it's check or draft or anything. If after taking all precautions, everything, then also you have to face a problem, then you will require best legal brain to solve it. So, basically, when we talk of money laundering, in India, money laundering has taken a different character than anywhere else. As we normally know, when a crime is committed, usually crime is committed for profit, somebody to some profit, some money, some assets, something that become proceeds of crime. People try to disguise it, the illegal origin of that, so that they can use it in a legitimate manner. That process is usually considered money laundering. But in India, the way it is defined, the moment you commit a scheduled crime and get the money, that itself becomes money laundering. So it is more stringent in Indian situation. And you know, the criminals want to hide the illegal wealth so that they can, those cannot be seized. They can use it in future. So they use mostly the help directly or indirectly of a chartered accountants. So, and in fighting it out, fighting the cases of money laundering, I'm sure Suniji will dwell upon the subject, how a chartered accountant can be of better help than a regular criminal lawyer. I have seen it from my experience. Regular criminal lawyers in the tribunal, they fall day in, day out in explaining the money trend. And whereas the chartered accountant representatives do much better. So there is a very great scope for professional practice in this area. My time is short, and I have introduced the subject. I have lived in this subject from even before its birth till today. So I am probably one of the oldest person connected with the Indian anti-money laundering law. So, and I'm happy that as long as it is possible, I'll contribute to its growth, development, and wherever possible, I'll try to pitch in. One thing I wanted to tell is, yesterday it was being told that money laundering is a continuing crime. Yes, it is a continuing crime, but in one case, that is Hassan Ali case in Bombay High Court in 2012, told that old cases where scheduled offense were committed earlier, but laundering took place after the introduction of the law, then it is no longer continuing offense. The day it is laundered, the action stopped. So those kind of cases, earlier scheduled offense, but laundering during present times would have, for those, it is not a continuing offense. For all others, it is a continuing offense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Arandas. It's always nice to hear your expert view and experience on this topic. Sir, as you rightly mentioned, money laundering is not evolved in just 1 or 2 decades. It's happening in our society from many centuries. But even before the days of electronic monitoring, it was difficult to move large sums without attracting attention from law enforcement and tax authorities. Now, in recent years, data analytics and machine learning have made the task of identifying illicit money even easier. So, my dear friends, today we have with us Sri Ashwini Taneja, an expert in this opinion from New Delhi. We know Mr. Taneja very well, but it's better to closely know him. Mr. Taneja is a former member of ITAT. He had also practiced as a chartered accountant in varied areas of auditing, due diligence, tax planning, litigation and business advisory, and restructuring, etc. Currently, Mr. Taneja is practicing as a lawyer with Messrs. RRA Tax India, specializing in the area of tax anti-money laundering law, Benami law, Black Money Act, and he is making regular representation before Adjudicating Authority and the Appellate Tribunal of Benami Law and PMLA, ITAT, High Courts, and Honorable Supreme Court of India. Good numbers of landmark cases argued by him before different courts or authored by him at the tribunal have been published in the leading tax journals of the country. He is always available for discussion on issues arising on these subjects. And today, Mr. Taneja will address us on the practical aspects of anti-money laundering law, its interplay with income tax law, and the role of CAs in handling the same. Now, not making much time of yours, I am requesting Mr. Taneja to please address us. Welcome, sir. Floor is yours, sir. Welcome, sir. Once again. Over to Taneja, sir.
Thank you, Sandeep bhai, for your words of praise. तारीफ किसको नहीं अच्छी लगती, हमें भी लगती है. But I don't want to remain oblivious to the fact that I am just one of you today and standing before an august gathering of intellectuals. And my special regards to Shri R.N. Dash, who is our senior in the profession. And he has been a noble officer, a wonderful human being. And my special regards to the dignitaries in the participants and my professional colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my professional brothers and sisters. And above all, Pawan Agarwal ji, because of whose efforts we could today, who make a beginning, efforts is of everybody, but who make a beginning of setting up this session. Anup Sanghai Saab, Narendra Gupta ji, then Rajesh Agarwal bhai, then Sandeep Savaria ji, Tarun Gupta ji again, Krishna Kejriwal ji, and everybody. I'm sorry if I'm not able to take all the names. All this has been effort of the teamwork of the three organizations, and I'm really pleasantly surprised that at such a short time, such a good coordination could take place. And amongst the participant, Arun Singhania ji is there with us. Many big names I can see, Vanjara Saab and everybody else. So, sir, thank you very much for sparing the time at these tough moments which we are passing through. During this session, during this course, in this approach of mutual learning, I think we will pass the time easily and more productive manner. So with this, I will begin my tour with you with regard to the PMLA, which is today's topic assigned to me. One of the subjects which I have started liking the way it has been drafted. You might be thinking why I'm saying the way it has been drafted. In fact, I will have to take you to the origin, how this law happened to come to our country. In fact, around 97 or even before that, globally it was felt that some of the crimes are happening because these criminals are getting opportunity to do funding to themselves. That in disguised fashion, meaning thereby the funding is happening in such a manner that that funding is happening in such a manner that they are able to convert the color of the money, meaning thereby they are able to convert the tainted money into untainted money and channelize it back into various avenues wherever these were needed. So because of that, the problem was arising and it was felt globally that something should be done so as to bring some kind of regulations so that this kind of money laundering exercise could be stopped. So keeping in view that aspect, this was a resolution was passed at United Nations that that the countries should pass the laws with a view to curb this practice of doing money laundering by these criminals or the entities who are helping these kind of criminals. So then Finance Action FATF, Financial Action Task Force, were also constituted for this purpose. So on the basis of recommendation of FATF and in pursuance to the guidelines passed and the resolution passed at the United Nations, the momentum took place in our country to bring out a legislation. So the efforts began, as far as I know, in 97. So first bill was presented. Then eventually it took the shape of an act in 2002. So that is how the anti-money laundering law took birth in our country, because of the requirement, global requirement of various countries to bring some kind of stoppage to this practice of converting bad money into good money and then using it as channelizing it further again and to help them in their deeds. So friends, in this regard, I will take you, first of all, I would like to share my screen because I would like to, yes, friends. So if you would kindly see, am I able to show my slides? Yes, if there is any problem, please do let me know in between. So that is a brief history about how anti-money laundering law came into picture. Now, about the various laws, the way laws have come to take place in our country, I would like to begin with an anecdote or with a metaphor kind of thing to keep you updated with the position which we are going to face in times to come. I will give a small story. In a jungle, they wanted to catch hold of monkeys who were creating menace. So it was getting difficult because monkeys were running here and there from one tree to the other, all that. So what they did, they took a pot, a narrow mouth pot with a narrow mouth. So I mean, hardly one can put his hands into it. So filled it with dry fruits and nuts and all that, and put it in the jungle, fix it somewhere. So a monkey came, wanted to grab a handful of nuts, so inserted his hand in it. Now, since his hand was full of nuts, so it became little broader. So it was difficult for him to take the hand out. So but since it was not possible to take the hand out and he could not have taken the pot away, so he had one choice, either to stay there or to leave the nuts and run away. But he was so finicky about the nuts. So craving was so high, so fierce, that he did not want to leave the nuts. So that is how the monkey stayed there, and he came into the hands of the persons who wanted to catch them. So something like that, the laws are, going to have the clutches. So, temptation to do tax evasion is like that nuts. Small temptation, but the risk is big. The risk is that just a small temptation of tax evasion, but what is waiting for the people who are interested in tax evasion is not only income tax law now. What is waiting to catch them is maybe now Black Money Act, Benami Law, Enforcement Directorate under PMLA, FIEO, SFIO, various provisions of Companies Act, that is section 212(8) and 447. And believe me, these are the most draconian laws which one could imagine on earth. Next to TADA, etc., I would say. And certain provisions are so harsh that the entire burden has been shifted upon the accused. The entire basic fabric and framework of the Constitution has been altered to bring this law more effective and to provide teeth to these laws. And believe me, friends, PMLA is one such law which is proving you will happen day in, day out. So persons who are wrongdoers, they are caught, they are tortured, they are punished, they are prosecuted, whatever may happen. But certain persons who have done some dealings with such kind of persons who are the wrongdoers, they have to also take every step very carefully. NDPS Act, for example, narcotics. So the laws are like that, that a person who has done any dealing with that, because under NDPS, a person who is accused under NDPS, his 6 years assets he has to disclose, he has to declare. In case he is not able to declare properly and justify the sources of those assets, any of those assets can be attached. And it is so for not only accused and the related persons also. And the definition of related person is very wide, not only his family members. The definition of related person is also, say, suppose that accused is director in a company, so other directors also of that company. If he is partner in a firm, other partners of that firm. If he is a tenant, then landlord also. So, I mean, the definition is very wide. So therefore, Dash Sahab has correctly portrayed. I am thankful to Dash sir for setting the ball rolling. That it is not, for example, when I move on the road, I'm not required to be careful only about me. I am required to be careful also about the other person. If I am driving, the other person who can do wrong. Suppose I am driving car and person in front of me is driving very rash. So he can move left, he can move right, he can apply the brake suddenly. So the moment he applies the brake suddenly, it's quite possible that I am not able to apply the brakes and I can do just bang, hit him from the behind. So similarly here also, it's like driving on the road, you're walking on the road, you have to be careful for all the surroundings. So because of reinforcement of these laws, it becomes essential for me also to understand that how carefully I have to move. Friends, yesterday I have already shared that ED's, the connect of ED, the spectrum of PMLA and powers of ED are so wide, then they can catch hold of these chimpanzees. Because if some of those who are joined today, just I will repeat in 1 minute only, that it happened because the violation of Wild Protection Act was done, which is one of the scheduled offense, and that is how ED got the powers to attach these chimpanzees being proceeds of crime. And then this news, it was there yesterday. And then this also, I want to repeat this, that the three agencies are coordinating among themselves as well as using power of high order data analytics. I'm skipping this because I have already covered it. Now coming to the money laundering. What, friends, according to is money laundering? So many, ideas come to our mind that money laundering is, say, converting black to white. So if converting black to white itself is money laundering, then the tax evasion is also money laundering, because there also conversion takes place of money. So money laundering is something more than that. Changing the color not only from black to white, but changing its texture also, its nature also, its its identity also. So that changing the identity means a money which was, say, tainted money, a bad money earned from bad sources, if converted into some good money, like money earned from good sources, it non-tainted, untainted money. So that will something to do with money laundering, and we will try to understand it in little more details. For example, illegal dirty money converted into legitimate money. So these are some of the activities which were noted by FATF and few other agencies, that through which the offense of money laundering is done by many people. Then before I go more into the details, only few aspects I'll be taking. Legislation and authorities governing the anti-money laundering law in India, right? This is what the immediate first question comes to our mind. That is PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. As I told you that it came into action notification force in 2002. It prohibits and penalizes the money laundering activities in India. And then who are the agencies and judicial authorities? The enforcement agencies for income tax law is Income Tax Department. For Benami, it is BPU, Benami Prohibition Unit, though it is part of Investigation Wing, which is again part of Income Tax Department. For PMLA, altogether separate agency has been created, which is called as Enforcement Directorate. It has offices located in all major cities of the country. One office is in Kolkata also. The executives functions under the act like search and survey, provisional attachment, arrest, initiate, prosecution, etc. And these are performed by the authorized officers of the act. We will discuss about them in detail. Then the other agencies, adjudicating authority, about which you must know, because we chartered accountants are required to do a lot of things about adjudicating authority. So this is a quasi-judicial authority established under the act, which exclusively adjudicates matters connected with the and incidental to the attachment and retention of property records. So meaning thereby, once the attachment, etc. is done by the Enforcement Directorate, then it's adjudication about the attachment orders then it is done by the adjudicating authority. So this adjudicating authority, in fact, it is presently located in India, only one bench. Presently, there are three members. One is chairman, other two members. Chairman is from the IAS background. He is 1978 batch IAS officer, so administrative background. And then we have member law, who was earlier practicing lawyer in this field only, PMLA. And then another third gentleman is former IRS officer. He is member finance or member technical, whatever you may call. Then only one bench is there in Delhi, located in Delhi only, as I said. So the next question arises whether the matters are heard as a division bench or singly. In fact, Benami law matters are heard as per DV because of the requirement of law, but PMLA matters are heard singly, meaning thereby single member can hear the matter unless the chairman of the adjudicating authority is of the opinion that no, this particular matter should be heard by two members. Then appellate tribunal. After the order is passed by the adjudicating authority, then the matter appeal of it can be filed by the either party, that is aggrieved party, which could be enforcement directorate, or which could be the any aggrieved party against whom at a property of attachment order has been passed, etc., or any acquisition has been made. So then this appeal is filed before the appellate tribunal, which was established under SAFEMA. It is not the income tax appellate tribunal, it is the appellate tribunal which was established under SAFEMA of a POSA, and now under section 25 of PMLA, the charge has been given to that very tribunal to discharge the functions under PMLA. The appeal is to be filed within a period of 45 days from the receipt of the order of the adjudicating authority. And the appeal from the order of the appellate tribunal needs to be filed. The jurisdiction lies with the jurisdictional high court, where the aggrieved party resides or carries on business or works for gain. Then special court. Yes, this is where we need to have some specific knowledge. So in fact, the proceedings of enforcement directorate go in two directions. In one direction, that is the attachment, that is the civil consequences, another is the criminal consequences. So civil consequences, when we talk about the attachment, etc., proceeds of crime, etc. And criminal consequences, when the enforcement directorate files complaint in the special court, that is Court of Sessions of the city, under section 45, read with section 3. And then the designated court of session, that is commonly known as special court, that takes care of, that conducts the trial, the criminal trial under criminal law against whom the complaint has been filed by the enforcement directorate. So both the proceedings go simultaneously. On the one hand, the attachment proceedings go through adjudicating authority and appellate tribunal, and other proceedings go through special court and then district court, and then goes up to the high court and Supreme Court, like that. So there are certain issues, basic things which you should know. The first thing is that, okay, I will tell you once I discuss about the scheduled offense, because the special court conducts two trials simultaneously. One trial of the scheduled offense on the basis of which the offense of money laundering does the piggybacking, and also the offense of money laundering, trial of offense of money laundering. So two trials are done generally simultaneously, even if the other trial was being done by some other court, but the ED has been given power to make request to the other court to commit the case to the special court who is conducting the trial under PMLA. So that court is duty bound under the law to send that matter to the special court, so that both the trials can be done jointly. Then important definitions I would be taking up. Friends, first of all, money laundering. We have understood in the common parlance that what is the offense of money laundering, but let us try to understand in the proper legal sense. PMLA defines the offense of money laundering under section 3 as whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or knowingly assists or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in any process or activity connected with the proceeds of crime, including its concealment, possession, acquisition or use, and projecting or claiming as untainted money, as untainted property, shall be guilty of offense of money laundering. So friends, kindly see word "and" I have put in red ink, meaning thereby, number one, the word there is one "and" means the other condition, that is the condition, last condition of projecting it as untainted money, is also required to be fulfilled. But why I had to put in red color? Because there is one amendment, and it is being interpreted that because of that amendment, that "and" word is to be read as "or" now. Now it is a gray area. We will definitely discuss in detail. So I will leave it as of now at that stage. And then friends, the new amendment which has been made with effect from 1st August 2019 is that one explanation has been added. And this explanation reads as, for the removal of doubt, it is hereby clarified that a person shall be guilty of offense of money laundering if such person is found to have directly or indirectly attempted to indulge or knowingly assisted or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in one or more of the following processes or activities connected with the proceeds of crime, namely concealment or possession or acquisition or use or projecting. Now kindly see, the word is or. Before projecting it is or, and after projecting it is or projecting as untainted property or claiming as untainted property. Now there are or and or and or everywhere. Now because of this confusion when the words and was used, so a lot of controversy took place. So that is why this explanation has been made. Now 2-3 things comes to my mind here. First thing which comes to my mind is, first of all, this law has been amended by way of an explanation. It has been said for removal of doubts. Whereas if you kindly see, earlier the word and was there. Now the words used are or. So since there is a change in law, I don't think it is clarificatory law. So it does not remove the doubts, it changes the law. So since it changes the law, it can be brought out with a retrospective effect only. But since it makes a mention of removal of doubts, I think this is violating the provisions of our constitution, the fabric of our constitution. So I think it calls for a challenge. Its constitutionality, in my considered opinion and with due respect, should be challenged, needs to be challenged, because the law is, it is bringing out a new law. Not only it is bringing out the new law, it is changing the whole fabric, the very concept of money laundering. It is, I mean, I would say, attacking the fundamental principle that a person can be punished for one offense once only. How it happening, how it is making double jeopardy, double whaming, and crossing the limits of our constitution, that also we'll discuss shortly. For the time being, let's go on to the next topic. And explanation also adds this second thing, that is by way of clause 2, that is clause 1 which I read. Clause 2 says, the process or activity connected with the pursuits of crime is a continuing activity and continues till such time a person is directly or indirectly enjoying the proceeds of crime by its concealment or possession or acquisition or use or projecting it as untainted property or claiming it as untainted property in any manner whatsoever. Now, what does it mean? In fact, what happened, whenever any person did any particular scheduled offense, maybe he did not earn any proceeds of crime there from, but he may have done any other criminal activity, which was though criminal activity, and he earned proceeds from there, but it was quite possible that that criminal activity did not form part in the list of scheduled offenses. So there was a trouble for the prosecution to rope in such kind of proceeds. So therefore, this amendment has been made that if any other, no, sorry, this is about, I'm sorry, I had gone to some other provision also, which I'm going to take later on. Now, what happened in this case? What used to happen that suppose a person is having proceeds of crime, and that proceeds of crime he's continuing with it. Now the issue arose that suppose there was something, say PMLA Act was brought out in 2002. It had say 10 items in the list of scheduled offenses, and one particular offense was not there in the list of scheduled offenses. Now after some time, what happened, the list was amended and some new items were added. But an offense done prior to that, it was said that since the offense was done prior to it being listed in the scheduled offenses, that cannot be put into the list of scheduled offenses and therefore cannot be described as an offense of money laundering on the basis of that offense. But the proceeds generated from there was continued to be held by that person. So therefore, this explanation has been added to cover up that, to rope in that situation also, by saying that the process or activity connected with the pursuits of crime is a continuing activity. So meaning thereby, if the pursuits of crime is continued till the date, suppose the offense was committed in say 2004, and that scheduled offense list was amended in 2006, but that proceeds of crime generated from in 2004 is continued to be held till 2008. So it will be said that that offense is continued, that activity or the pursuits of crime is continued. So this explanation is added for that purpose. Now, what do you mean by pursuits of crime? This, I have repeatedly used this term pursuits of crime. It cannot be used on the basis of generic sense because it has been given a specific meaning, though it is fraught with controversy. But according to me, there is no scope of controversy. The law is clear. Let's try to understand what the law is, and then also we'll deal with the controversy and the vagueness which some people are talking about. Now, proceeds of crime means the property. It is defined under section 2(1)(u). Proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by any person as a result of criminal activity relating to a scheduled offense, or the value of any such property. Now, this word "or the value of any such property" is very important. Or where such property is taken or held outside the country, then the property equivalent in value held within the country. Now, there is a controversy that what will be taken exactly in the proceeds of crime. Only the property which was derived from the criminal activity, or any other property which is equivalent in value, or that very property, only value of that very property. So the definition look to be little confusing, but I will deal with you. I will demonstrate before you that in fact there is no confusion, and because of lack of proper judgments, confusion was being created on the part of some of the persons. But now some judgments have come which brings out good clarity, and I will give dissection of this section before you. Now, new amendment has been made with effect from 1/8/2019. For the removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that proceeds of crime include property not only derived or obtained from the scheduled offense, but also any property which may directly or indirectly be derived or obtained as a result of any criminal activity. Now, this is where, which I was 2 minutes back, I was trying to discuss, that if some subsidiary criminal activity is done, and from that any proceeds of crime are generated, then the proceeds of crime from that activity will also be called as proceeds of crime. Scheduled offense. Now, we have been talking about this word scheduled offense. What does it mean? Scheduled offense. Scheduled offenses are the offenses as prescribed in the schedule to the PMLA, which is divided in 3 parts, that is part A, part B, part C. So scheduled offense is the genesis of the offense of money laundering, as there cannot be any offense of money laundering unless and until an offense provided in the schedule of a PMLA has been first committed. So friends, the PMLA Act has one schedule. Now that schedule contains the list of various offenses. Now what are those offenses? Like offense under Prevention of Corruption Act, offense under any offense under IPC, say forgery, say dacoity, say theft, then offense under any Black Money Act, Water Pollution Act, Water Pollution Control Act, Air Pollution Control Act, and some offenses committed under Customs Act, and there is a long list of such offenses. So basically, criminal activities, many of the criminal activities have been covered. Smuggling, narcotics, drug peddling, all those things are covered over there. Now I can share with you this basic chart which I had prepared to make easy the understanding of the concept of money laundering. So the process of money laundering envisages these 3 stages basically. The first stage is that there will be first of all commission of scheduled offense. So friends, meaning thereby this offense, that is offense of money laundering, has to proceed with the commission of the scheduled offense. So meaning thereby there has to be first of all some other offense which we call as scheduled offense, some other criminal activity. So offense of money laundering does piggybacking on some other offense which is called as scheduled offense. In case there is no scheduled offense, no offense of money laundering we can talk about. And then second stage would be generation of proceeds of crime from the stage 1, that is commission of scheduled offense. Some proceeds should be generated. For example, a person has done smuggling, theft, drug peddling, and from there he has generated some proceeds. So that is stage 2. Stage 3, when that person deposits, that person converts that good money, that bad money into good money, meaning thereby he portrays the bad money as good money. So it is done by him by placement, layering, integration, etc. So that is how 3 stages are comprised in the offense of money laundering. But now there is a big question mark on stage 3. Is stage 3 is also integral part, or it is just one of the stages? So it may be there, it may not be there. So now after the amendment made in section 3, one of the interpretation which is coming is that the moment stage 1 and stage 2 is done, it is amounting to offense of money laundering. But according to my understanding, the stage 3 is sole of offense of money laundering. If we remove stage 3 and if we hold a person guilty for offense of money laundering at stage 2 itself, then it will be punishing him for the same offense twice. Because if he is done theft, so for theft theft, he will be otherwise punishable under IPC, separate code of conduct. And again, for the same offense under money laundering, merely because on his acquisition of proceeds of crime, if he will be punished, I think that is punishing a person twice for the same offense. But the law, I believe, will evolve in this direction, or by way of proper amendments, or maybe through some good judgments from the court of law. Then this I have already explained, placement, that is assimilating of proceeds of crime into financial system by layering, that is routing of assimilated proceeds of crime to hide its sources, then integrating, that is reintroduction of the proceeds of crime subsequent to the above two stages to project such proceeds of crime as white money, as untainted money. Then commencement of proceedings. So how the proceedings are commenced under a PMLA, who does these proceedings, etc. So friends, as I told you, as far as answer of the question who is concerned, it is Enforcement Directorate, that is an enforcement agency. And how it commences the proceedings, it can commence the proceedings by doing any of these three things which I mentioned before you on the slides. That is inquiry and investigation. The enforcement officer of the ED can make inquiry and investigation upon the accused or suspected means against whom any complaint is filed under scheduled offense by CBI or by ACB or by police or by any other investigating agency for commission of any scheduled offense. So then on the basis of that, inquiry investigation is started by the Enforcement Directorate. Then summons under section 50 of PMLA. The enforcement officer issues summons to the person for recording their statement and for the production of any document. Any statement recorded under section 50 of the Act is admissible evidence in the courts. That is what the officer said the ED are claiming. Though there are some certain ifs and buts, but that is a position strongly taken by the Enforcement Directorate. So ED has been given powers under section 50 to call a person for witness for recording the statement of that person. And then ED has been given the power to conduct survey, search and seizure under section 16 and 17 of PMLA. And then it has also been given power to make retention or impounding the books of accounts and the assets and all that. Then how the proceedings are taken further. So three kind of proceedings are initiated by the Enforcement Directorate normally. That is, first proceedings is that after carrying out search or survey or in any proceeding, if it gets hold of some documents, some information, some assets, then he can retain it. So thereafter the ED files original application before the adjudicating authority under section 17(4) of PMLA for retention of the records and for making prayer for its extension. Then the ED has been given the power under section 5 for making attachment of the property. So the ED can file original complaint after making attachment of the property. It can file original complaint before the adjudicating authority under section 5(5) of PMLA, and the adjudicating authority is required to decide the original complaint, and then wherein they also decide whether the provisional attachment is to be continued or it is to be quashed or what is to be done. Then then proceedings for criminal prosecution. That is a very, very important facet and very significant power given to the Enforcement Directorate. Then simultaneously, they can also file a complaint before the Court of Sessions, that is a special court under section 45 for prosecution of the accused who is accused to be guilty of offense of money laundering. Then friends, the original application under section 17 is conducted by the enforcement officer on the basis of information in his possession. I think this we can skip because within 180 days, the original application is to be decided by the adjudicating authority. Then since we have limited time, we'll be covering up only important issues here today. So then this is very important aspect wherein we chartered accountants can also play a pivotal role. We can support our advocates who have to appear before the adjudicating authority in defending this or in attacking this original complaint. So original complaint is filed by the authorized officer after making the attachment that this property has been attached. So adjudicating authority has to make decision on that. So then adjudicating authority gives opportunity to both the parties, and then both the parties represent their cases respectively. And then ultimately adjudicating authority decides yes, there is a good case for attachment or no within the provisions of law. And if it says, yes, there is a good case for attachment, then it confirms the attachment order. And if it says no, then it releases the property. So if it confirms the attachment order, then the ED has been given power to take possession subject to some rules. So it is therefore advised that immediately after attachment order is confirmed by the adjudicating authority, an appeal should be filed to the appellate tribunal to save precious time, because lest the ED swings into action and takes possession of the property. That is where this law is made more draconian in comparison to Benami law, because under Benami law, no confiscation or possession takes place before the appeal is decided by the appellate tribunal. Here, there is some gray area which really puts many people, many sometimes innocent people, into difficulty because of unknowing mistakes they have done. So this is an area where some amendment is required, some clarity is required. Then this I have already covered. Then this the shelf life of the attachment order is now 365 days, because if within the period of 365 days, if complaint is not filed by the ED before the criminal court, then this automatically lapses. And if it is filed, then this continues unless it is released from the appellate tribunal. Then this validity of shelf life, I have already discussed this earlier. There was no period, then period of 90 days was provided. Now the period has been extended to 365 days. Then criminal prosecution. Then as I said, the offense of money laundering as per section 3 of the PML is punishable with rigorous imprisonment for a term not less than 3 years, but which may extend to 7 years, and shall also be liable to fine. And where the scheduled offense has been committed under the paragraph 2 of part A, offense that is under NDPS Act of Schedule to the PMLA, then the maximum imprisonment is 10 years and fine. So if the offense has been done under NDPS, that is drug peddling, etc., then 10 years. Otherwise, it is 7 years. And prosecution under PMLA, unlike other criminal prosecution, is initiated qua filing of prosecution complaint as prescribed under section 55 of the Act. The trial under PMLA is a session trial and is governed by the provisions of Criminal Procedure Code, CRPC. Then friends, now this was very basic about the fundamental, how the functioning of the ED is done and what is the basic framework or fabric of PMLA law. Please do that recording. Okay. So friends, firstly, I wanted to bring to your notice, that Interministerial Coordination Committee, section 72A. The government has set up this Interministerial Coordination Committee to establish a more effective coordination between FIU and various agencies. Multi-probe agencies could be like ED, Income Tax Department, SFIO, BPU, etc., etc. Now, pursuits of crime. Now I come back to that controversy about which I touched in the beginning, that what do we mean by the word pursuits of crime? What is the definition? What is the scope? Now, friends, some people say that this words or value of such property means that in case the pursuits of crime cannot be attached, then any other property can be attached. Meaning thereby pursuits of crime is not there or not clearly identified, that any other property of the equivalent value can be attached. According to my understanding, no. The intention of the legislature is to make attachment of the pursuits of crime only, or the pursuits of crime wherever it is traveling and its value embedded therein. Now, for example, a person makes theft of ₹10 lakh and he deposits in his bank account. Now, this amount deposited in his bank account, from that it purchases shares. And then from these shares, the theft is scheduled offense. And from these shares, he sells their shares and there comes ₹50 lakhs. And he adds another ₹25 lakhs in it. And then he buys a plot of ₹75 lakhs. So 50 lakhs, then 25 lakhs, another amount, and then 75 lakhs. So the pursuits of crime here would be anything, any of these, say ₹10 lakh, yes, pursuits of crime. Then the shares which he bought 10 lakh rupees, yes. Then shares sold for ₹50 lakhs, it comes to bank account, that 50 lakhs, yes. And then that plot, out of that plot of 75 lakh, that ₹50 lakhs, but it is value of that pursuits of crime, which has increased. That will be pursuits of crime. But suppose this 50 lakh rupees, after getting it deposited in the bank account, or say, let me be very simple, that suppose this theft amount is stolen of ₹10 lakh, he loses by way of casino. He goes to casino, plays it over there, plays in casino and loses the money of ₹10 lakh. But by chance, he has got another plot of land gifted from his grandfather. Whether that plot can be attached to the extent of rupees 10 lakh as amount as value of such property? The answer is no. According to my understanding, it is like, you know, suppose you dip an ant, एक चींटी को आप ink में dip कीजिए, and wherever that ant, that cheetah, wherever that ant is moving, you know, dipped in the ink, wherever it is leaving that ink, leaving that mark, wherever its trail is going, it is on similar fashion, the proceeds of crime, wherever it is traveling, only that can be attached, not other properties. Now this is what I said on the basis of my common understanding. I will take the support from the provisions of this law also. Now, if you see, two situations have been envisaged under the law. First situation and second situation. First situation is where money is held, where the property is held within the country. And the second situation is where property is taken or held abroad. Now, the word value of any such property, I will show with this, kindly see on the slide. Now, these situations have been clearly demarcated. I have bifurcated this section into two parts, that is first situation and second situation. So first situation where money is held in India. So for this, it talks about the proceeds of crime as proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained from the criminal activity or value of any such property. But in the second situation was amended later on. It was not earlier there in the law. It was amended later on. There it talks about where property is taken or held abroad. Then it says proceeds of crime means any property derived from criminal activity or the property equivalent in value held within the country or abroad. So friends, kindly see, this amendment was added. This amendment was made because the earlier expression in the, as per the legislature itself, did not include the word equivalent. So property of equivalent value were not intended to be covered in the earlier situation. That is why, and that is how the property in the equivalent value, because the legislature wanted to be included because of the reasoning that when the properties are taken abroad, they goes out of the beyond the territorial jurisdiction of the country. And that is why any other property of the equivalent value have been allowed to be put in the category of proceeds of crime so that these can be attached by the enforcement directorate. But the legislature is very clear, and that is why it has not been put in the first category. There is a strong reasoning behind it. Whenever legislature uses a particular expression, that too in contradistinction to other expression, legislature is always very clear about it. So since legislature is very clear about it, we cannot interpret, we cannot bring out any other meaning put forth by the legislature. So friends, the law is very clear in this regard. Kindly bear with me. I will also share one very important judgment in this regard. The law was earlier vague, but now the law is very clear, as you would see from the reading of the latest judgment coming from Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court in the name of Seema Garg and others. And the date of judgment is 6 March 2020, and its number is PMLA 1-3 of 2019. In this judgment, very good analysis have been, luckily, I have been taking this kind of reading, this kind of reasoning only since last 1 year. And luckily, Honorable High Court also has accepted on the similar reasoning, accepted this argument. And the Honorable High Court has also echoed the words of Honorable Andhra Pradesh High Court, which were given in the case of Satyam Computers, and by Delhi High Court in the case of Abdullah Ali Bashraf and others. And but Honorable Punjab and High Court has not agreed with the single judge judgment of Department of Enforcement versus Axis Bank in the number 14143 of 2019. So this judgment in the red color before you is against on this issue, and other three judgments have echoed the same line which I have just discussed before you. So because of this mixing up and lack of clarity in this regard, this law has been used in very, very harsh manner than what was the intention and scope of the law. Then friends, section 3 versus vis-a-vis section 24. Now section 3 we have already read. Whenever we talk about money laundering, normally we chartered accountants simultaneously say one more word, that in this case of PMLA, the peculiar thing is the burden of proof is upon the accused. Normally, the burden of proof is upon the person. Normally, the burden of proof is upon the person who burden of proof is upon the person who is the person who is saying that that person is guilty. So what I mean to say is, under the one of the fabric of our constitution is that a person is presumed to be innocent unless he is proved guilty, and burden to prove that he is guilty is upon the person who is alleging him to be guilty. So whosoever is making the accusations is to prove his accusation. That is a fundamental principle of criminal jurisprudence which we have understood so far. But it is said that this burden has been reversed. This concept is not recognized in the PMLA, and this burden has been reversed. So there is a reverse burden of proof under PMLA. So whether this is a fact, if yes, to what extent it is fact. So friends, in fact, there is some kind of misunderstanding in this regard, and that is what I will discuss with you. So before that, I will discuss section 3 once again. I have read the definition of section 3, that whoever is indulged or knowingly assists or knowingly is a party, etc., in the offense of money laundering, etc. I have already read. I will not repeat it. And then explanation has been added. Now, this explanation also says that anything or projecting. So one confusion which is always there, which has become now more, is that whether the third stage is also required to be proved or only 2 stages are required. Anyways, leaving it at that stage, let me come to section 24, which talks about allegedly about reverse burden of proof. So burden of proof in section in PML, in Benami law, that is PBPT Act, there is nothing about burden of proof. But in PMLA, there is one section about burden of proof, and this is section 24. I will read it, and then I'll also share with how it is being wrongly interpreted in most of the cases. So section 24 says, in any proceedings relating to proceeds of crime under this act, in case of a person charged with the offense of money laundering, the authority or the court shall, unless the contrary is proved, presume that the proceeds of crime are involved in money laundering. So friends, if you very fast, if you read, you think as if everything has been, put on the person who is accused of offense of money laundering. But if you read it slowly, you will find only one of the facets have been put on the shoulders of the accused. In case of a person charged with the offense of money laundering, the authority or the court shall presume that such proceeds of crime are involved in the money laundering. So as I said, there are 3 stages. Stage number 1, offense, scheduled offense, commission of scheduled offense. Stage number 2, generation of proceeds. And stage number 3, conversion. So now what this section 24 is saying, that the moment this acquisition is done, this third stage will be presumed to have been done. So acquisition is only about third stage, that is stage number 3. About stage number 1 and stage number 2, that is commission of offense and generation of proceeds of crime, they have to be still proved in terms of principles of criminal jurisprudence, that is principles CRPC. Because if, suppose, to give you an example, a person has done theft, earned money, and then it deposits in the bank account. So these 2 stages, that he has done theft and he has earned money, these 2 have still to be proved by the prosecution. This third stage can be presumed. So burden has been shifted only with regard to third stage and not with regard to these 2 first stages. That is my considered opinion. But in most of the cases which are put up by the ED, the things are blurred, mixing is done, and impression is created as if everything has been put on the shoulders of the person charged with the offense of money laundering. Next. This I have already read. Just for your clarity, I am taking a pause over here. Yes, sir. Then, sir, section 5, which is very, very useful section for us to understand. And we chartered accountants mostly will have a brush with section 5 only, because the criminal complaint will be handled by the advocates who are specializing in the criminal jurisprudence before the Court of Sessions. But here, the attachment part, here we chartered accountants can play some role. So therefore, I would be discussing and dealing this thing in little detail, and then we can skip other sections and come back straight away to the role of chartered accountants in handling of the provisions of money laundering. In fact, as I said, the power of attachment is there, attachment of property, that is proceeds of crime with the Enforcement Directorate. Firstly, I have defined, according to my understanding, proceeds of crime. Second, now if the enforcement directorate has reason to believe, that is the authorized officer of the enforcement directorate reason to believe that any person is in possession of any proceeds of crime. So proceeds of crime means, which I have explained before you according to my understanding. And B, such proceeds of crime are likely to be concealed, transferred, or dealt with in any manner which may result in frustrating any proceeds relating to confiscation such proceeds of crime. So these two conditions are mandatory. So firstly, reason has to be recorded, and then reason should be recorded based upon these two conditions. And third prerequisite is also there, that such an attachment order can be passed only subsequent to forwarding of a report under section 173 of CRPC to the magistrate. Though a proviso has been carved out for emergent situations when without the report under section 173 of CRPC, attachment order can be passed, but for exercise of such power, the authorized officer has to again record reason to believe in writing for immediate attachment of the property without report under section 173 being forwarded to the magistrate. Therefore, the legislature clearly provided for separate reasons to be recorded for such immediate and emergent actions. So the requirement is there normally that they have to do these three things, that 173 report should be also filed, and then there has to be that emergency kind of situation like this. But normally what is seen, the authorities have generally neglected to adhere to this twin requirement of recording the reasons to believe and utilize the power as given in the proviso without recording any separate reasons to believe. So firstly, the first lapse is reasons recorded are not, reasons are not recorded either, or they are not recorded in the manner as is the law envisages, because the recording of reason is not the hollow formality, and merely by reproducing the words given in the statute, it cannot say the valid reasons have been recorded. And that is what has been held recently by Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court in that same very case of Seema Garg, which I have just read before you, that Seema Garg judgment. Then there is said the recording of reasons should really prove the circumstances, existence of the circumstances is necessary. So it is not necessary that at the stage of recording of reason, there should be proof of offense of money laundering. But it is essential that on the basis of the circumstances on which reasons are being recorded, proof of existence of that circumstances, there should be that proof, it should be in possession of the person who is recording the reasons. So it is seen normally in mechanical manner, the reasons are recorded. These are not properly provided, and the prerequisite conditions precedent of the law, prescribed in the law, are not being adhered to in many cases. Then power of ED, search and seizure. There again, a lot of conditions are there. So power of search can be done. Now again, one proviso has been added that no search shall be conducted unless in relation to the scheduled offense a report has been forwarded to magistrate under section 157 of CRPC. Then search of persons, if authority authorized, and again section 18 also, we can skip for the time being. Then interplay between section 17, 20 and 21, this we can skip for the time being. In fact, whenever any application is filed by the ED under section 17 for retention of record, then it is mandated on the part of the enforcement directorate that they should simultaneously record satisfaction and reasons in this regard. But it is seen that the ED in many cases is not doing this exercise, and in many cases the adjudicating authority has also done away with the requirement by ignoring this lapse and allowed the application of the enforcement directorate despite this illegality. I am representing one such case before Honorable Delhi High Court, where I am taking up such kind of irregularity has taken place. Appellate tribunal has allowed the appeal. Now department is in appeal before the High Court, and the matter is sub judice. Section 20(4), the adjudicating authority, before authorizing the retention or continuation of the freezing of such property beyond the period, shall satisfy himself that the property is prima facie involved in the money laundering and the property is required for the purpose of education under section 8. Then, sir, I will skip that. Now, the lapse is done at the stage of adjudicating authority. I mean, some of them I will be putting before you. That section 8(1) PMLA clearly lays down that after the receipt of original application of original complaint, the adjudicating authority has to form independent reason to believe that any person has committed the offense of money laundering or is in possession of POC. And only after forming of such reason to believe can the adjudicating authority issue SCN to a person. However, it is generally observed that no reason to believe are provided to the defendants, neither there is any mechanism for inspection of the same. Then Friends, Section 8(4) provides that enforcement officer can forthwith take possession of the property of whose attachment has been confirmed by the urging authority. Then Rule 5(2) of PMLA prescribes that if the property confirmed for the attachment is immovable property, then the enforcement officer may serve an eviction notice of 10 days to occupants of such immovable property. Now, here the misuse of power is, friends, power of taking possession of the property by enforcement agency, draconian power, harsh, and a case of giving unfettered power to the agency. Though ideally the situation should be that notice should be issued for 10 days so that the appropriate mechanism, remedial mechanism can be taken, though that 10 days period is very short, but in its wisdom, the rule is like that. We have to abide by that. So therefore, the need arises on our part to be very vigilant, to guide our clients that in case any such situation is arising where a person's asset has been attached by calling it as proceeds of crime, then if attachment is confirmed by the urging authority, that immediately appeal should be filed at Delhi before the appellate tribunal. In case there is any lapse in filing of appeal before the appellate tribunal, then the ED can swing into action using this draconian power and take forthwith that possession, despite the fact that so far the crime has not been proved, the matter is pending before the trial court. Nowhere the offense has been proved to have been done, neither the scheduled offense or the offense of money laundering. But once the possession is taken, the property goes out of hand, the property may perish, etc., etc. Then other problems, friends, which we face, now there are summary procedure sometimes before the urging authority. Now, because of this summary procedure, what is happening is that no detailed findings are recorded. Urging authority is expected and obliged under the law to record a finding that whether scheduled offense has been committed, that whether this person has generated the proceeds of crime, and the property attached is from the proceeds of crime only. But instead of doing that, I mean, on presumption basis, sometimes orders are passed and the attachment orders are just confirmed. Even the property is not the same property, which is the proceeds of crime, property equivalent in value are attached, and without properly appreciating the law, that kind of property which are not even from proceeds of crime are attached. So that is where the miscarriage of justice is taking place in many cases, and urgent intervention is required by appropriate authorities in this regard. Then, friends, this interplay, I think I had covered yesterday, so I will not repeating it today. There is a strong interplay between the offense of money laundering and all these laws, which I am taking up by way of slide before you. So I'm skipping this case study. I will definitely put before you before I take up any other thing before you. That is the role of chartered accountants in handling this law. Friends, if you kindly, okay, I will tell you the brief facts and then we can discuss about how the law has been applied rightly or wrongly in this case. One distillery unit which was set up in 2005. That distillery unit was alleged to have committed some violation of Water Pollution Control Act on the ground that it discharged more water into the river by the Pollution Control Board. And after that, its treatment plant was changed, upgraded. Pollution Control Board, though filed an FIR, but no further action was taken and the offense was pending. But in the meantime, the ED swings into action and it sends a notice for attachment of the factory building. So I wondered how attachment of factory building for this violation, and the scheduled offense was alleged to be this only, was claimed to be this only. So when I further probed the facts, I found that the reasoning given was that since the more water was discharged, that means, for example, the company was having the capacity of say producing 45,000 kiloliter, but it discharged the water equivalent to 75,000 kiloliter. So that means it discharged extra water into the river, and that, conversely speaking, that means it made more production than the installed capacity by making violation of Water Pollution Control Act. And by making more production, it earned more sales, and thereby it earned more profit, and that profit was earned into factory building, wherein now around more than 500 workers are working. So the eviction notice and the attachment notice of that factory was given, and I represented before the tribunal, and tribunal has given a status quo matter in this case, looking into the urgency of the matter and the reasoning which we put forth in the all fairness of justice and all that. So that is how friends see sometimes how the powers are used in this manner, that law is applied in such a case that on the one hand there is only action of alleged allegation of violation of water pollution control and the designated agencies, Pollution Control Board, which has not given any punishment, etc., because of the corrections made by the company, immediately agreeing to it that if whatever things have been done inadvertently, they were corrected, but still ED has swung into action, attached the factory building or attempted to attach the factory building. So welcome to the world of PMLA. And the second case study which I have taken is of Bitcoins. So friends, if you remember earlier, the Bitcoin, there was no clarity whether it is illegal, legal. So many people joined the scheme. Many people floated the schemes. Few companies floated the scheme, and many people become the investor to earn quick money. So in one case, what happened? One gentleman also became investor, and then it became very close to the management of the company. And eventually a complaint was filed against that company of doing cheating with lakhs of people in various parts of the country. So that gentleman who was running and heading that company, he was put behind the bar. So this person who became investor and became close to the company, his name was also put in the FIR for the reason that he has acted with the management, whereas he was also one of the investors. So on that ground, ED swung into action and filed complaint against him and made attachment of his assets also. His FDR was also attached, though it was not earned from that Bitcoin business, but his FDR was attached because he dealt in Bitcoin, and he allegation was he helped the management in selling the Bitcoins. So that is why DASA was also saying that other persons who are dealing with the persons who have done offensive money laundering or alleged to have done the offensive money laundering, even they persons can also be brought into trouble. So friends, that is why we need to be careful. And now, role of chartered accountants, friends. What is the role of chartered accountants in handling the notice and attachment orders issued? Sorry. So friends, as I said, there are two kinds of consequences under PMLA. One is civil consequences and another is criminal consequences. When we talk about civil consequences, we say where there are only attachment of properties, proceeds of crime, movable assets, immobile assets. Those are civil consequences. Criminal consequences where criminal complaint is filed. Though the role of the chartered accountants can be fulfilled in both the scenarios. In criminal, for the reason that proper transaction can be explained by the chartered accountants in a very, very proper manner, so that appropriate pleadings could be taken. For example, in this Bitcoin case study. So Bitcoin case study, because there was huge trail going on, it was alleged that that company had, did business of more than 54 crores and all that. So huge trail was set up by the ED. So chartered accountants can very well explain to the court that what is Bitcoin, how the trail has happened, what has happened, how the transactions were done, what was the role of the client who was simply an investor, etc., etc., and provide this assistance to the lawyers who will be the forefront in representing this case. But in any case, under the attachment proceedings, the chartered accountant's role could be quite greater. For example, now I will take you another case study, which is happening nowadays wherever the default has been taken by the borrowers. And this is one of the most widespread cases in the country. For example, recent cases, Yes Bank, then Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi. Now what happens, or Sterling Biotech. Now what happens that suppose a person has obtained a loan from the banker. If the default is happened in repayment of that loan, and the banker is of the opinion that the loan was obtained by fraudulent means or there was siphoning of money, which is an offense under IPC. So the bank can file complaint before the ED. And suppose a bank files complaint before the ED that this gentleman has taken loan by commission of the scheduled offense in the form of this fraudulently forging the papers and fraudulently operating the loan, etc., by misrepresentation, etc. So then if ED comes into action, this amount which has been taken by loan, say a loan was taken of rupees 1,000 crore by a corporate giant. So this 1,000 crore rupees becomes proceeds of crime. Not only this 1,000 crore rupees become proceeds of crime. Wherever this trail has gone, because this amount of rupees 1,000 crore, that company will not keep in its bank account. It will acquire some assets. It will do some dealing with many persons, and there will be long chain. So like that ant, wherever this is going, having the ink on it, upon it, covered in the ink. So in the similar fashion, this friends, this situation, this proceeds will be traveling there, and since they will be traveling there, any of them can be attached as proceeds of crime. So therefore, when this such a huge money is involved and huge number of assets are involved, here comes the role of the chartered accountant, which I am going to explain before you. Identifying the source of the attached properties and differentiating it with the alleged proceeds of crime, identifying the loan utilization in the attached property, calculation of the correct value of any alleged proceeds of crime, valuation of the property attached and the comparison with the alleged proceeds of crime, proper financial accounting analysis, and preparation of money trail for the attached properties to demarcate the source of funds. Though they look to be very easy, but believe me, friends, neither lawyers can do it nor chartered accountants alone can do it. So chartered accountants can make a very good charting, very good tabulation, and then it can be explained in hand with the lawyers, and a very great amount of assistance can be done, or before the adjudicating authority, this representation can be made by themselves if they want to specialize under this law. Depends upon the flair and all those things. So friends, one thing I think you will agree with me, now we cannot take this law lightly. Lastly, I will sum up my talk by saying that the time has come when we must align and realign ourselves, and the first step which we should take in this direction is by learning how to learn at arm's length principle, friends. So that arm's length principle we can learn only when we do not become party to the transactions, and since we become party to the transactions, then somebody was asking me, sir, what are the problems we can suffer day in day out? I am getting these questions, sir. The moment we breach this principle of doing dealings with the clients at arm's length principle, or with any party at arm's length principle, then if any action is taken upon that party, there are pretty good chances that the auditors, the chartered accountants, the internal auditors, etc., they can also be made part of the investigation exercise and other consequences. So therefore, the time has come when we must really press a reset button and start our professional life with altogether in a different gear. So friends, thank you very much for the wonderful.
Thanks a lot, Aswani Taneja ji. Now I would request Gedar Delia ji to take the questions in the chat box, and then if anyone raises the hand, then you can take the question from them. First, the questions in the chat box can be taken. Gedar ji, over to you.
Thank you, Vivek ji. Now we have only two questions from the two fellows. The one is that CA S. Datta, which is how does a statutory auditor reporting under CARO 2020 get to know that a proceedings under Benami law is initiated against an auditing company unless management through management representation?
This question is being asked repeatedly from me. Probably Datta Saab or someone asked the same question when I delivered a talk at EIRC. So friends, as I said, I will divide it into two parts. First of all, if answer comes from your antarman, once you decide dealing at arm's length principle, आपको यहाँ से ही आंसर मिलता है कि आपको क्या करना है, कैसे करना है, यहीं से सब कुछ मिलता है आंसर. And this is the biggest guide. This is the biggest navigator, the greatest GPS ever made, and the God has gifted to us. Second, practically speaking, in both the aspects, whether we are talking about money laundering or Benami, in both the aspects, I will say like this. So firstly, with Benami, for example, if suppose you are making examination of a physical asset which are there in the balance sheet, at least you should talk about the title deeds. If the title deeds are not there in that company's name, then prima facie there is something to do with Benami. Similarly, if any asset has been acquired, you should know at what value the assets have been acquired, from whom it has been acquired. Suppose an asset which should be, say, of the worth of rupees 1 crore, if it is acquired, say 10 lakh, 20 lakh, that apparently question should be asked from whom it has been acquired, lest it is acquired from someone who has accumulated pursuits of crime. And if it is so, some representation should be received, or some reporting should be done, or at least some inquiry should be made, to the extent it is possible for an auditor, because an auditor is not an investigator. But to the extent an auditor's duties are there, we must discharge it diligently. Next question from Anil Katia ji. Do you think bank money lent has the ingredients of money laundering? If yes, please give any one example. Sir, I think in last part of my deliberations, I have covered up that if the loan has been taken fraudulently, most of the cases, I think more than 70% of the cases pending with ED are such cases where defaults have been done, and it is later found by the banker that, sir, this loan was taken by fraud. So to clean their chest, they will file the complaint. And in this process, some other officers will be caught, that senior management of the company will be caught. Now, why this confusion is happening, I will clarify that also. In fact, whenever the default takes place, default may be because of two reasons. Number one, there is some bad decision on the part of the company. There is a business loss. There is a change in business environment, and that happens a business loss, as a genuine business loss. Other, because of some fraudulent intention, some siphoning off is done. Loan is obtained through fraudulent documentation. Now, both are different scenario. It could be possible there are 60% cases of first situation and remaining 40% of this, but both are mixed up. So 100% cases are being treated alike. So that is what is giving rise to the problem. And the problem becomes more large when the borrower at the stage of the appellate tribunal says, sir, I want to deposit the money back to the lender, that is the bank. But ED says, no, sir, our first right, it is our first right. Now it is a tainted property. It is our right to attach. Nobody can touch it. So that is where serious amendment, drastic amendments are required in this law.
Next question is from Mr. R.T. Kakra ji, which I think Taneja ji has already explained yesterday. I'll request again to throw some light. Kindly explain PMLA nexus with Vivad Se Vishwas scheme. Maybe he's talking about the exemption under
Sir,
the.
kindly read section 5, section 6, and section 8 of VV Act, Vivad Se Vishwas Act. Kindly see, there is nothing is mentioned that you will get the immunity and other laws. Since nothing is mentioned, we cannot give any clarity, any promise, any assurance unless CBDT or any other agency comes. Suppose a person done a crime, other crime, scheduled offense, and if he pays tax money on that, so merely by payment of taxes, it cannot be said that gentleman has come clean. Now that gentleman will be, granted immunity under that offense also. I don't think it will be possible, even for the government to comment at this stage.
Next is Dinesh Banjara, who will certainly.
Few hands have been raised. Let us hear if they want to say anything.
Dinesh Banjara, please.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, बोलिए बंजारा जी बोलिए.
हाँ, तनेजा साहब.
बंजारा साहब बोलिए ना.
नमस्कार. ये एक दो इश्यू नहीं, बाकी का कर लीजिए ना, नहीं तो फिर मैं लास्ट में 2-3 इश्यू.
बोलिए.
सर, मैं ये बोल रहा था
जी.
What I understand is PMLA में there is no original jurisdiction with the ED. It is all borrowed jurisdiction, right? 30 schedule of offense वाले जो है, पहले 29 थे, फिर वो 30 ब्लैक मनी की घुसा दिया लास्ट ईयर.
जी.
उसमें अगर कोई वायलेशन होता है, दास साहब is also here, so they first register a complaint or an FIR under that law, and from that ED borrows the satisfaction and ED initiates a case. So it is a parallel. एक जन को दो जगह से मारा जा रहा है. My question is कि सर मान लीजिए कि वो IPC का था, एक FIR कर दिया पुलिस में या CBI में, जैसे बैंक वाला कहा आपने, तो बैंक का तो पहले तो they inform the CBI, not the ED. CBI FIR करता है, उसके 1 दिन 2 दिन 5 दिन बाद immediately ED एक EC करके शुरू कर देता है. तो उस आदमी को दो एजेंसी पैरेलल इन्वेस्टिगेशन कर रही है. If the original investigation fails in the court of law, then what happens to the second investigation which is done by ED? ED उसको confiscate करके बैठ गई है, because सब जगह एक ही जज एक ही कोर्ट में नहीं होता है सर. कंपनी लॉ 47 में भी करेगा, या सेबी का 12 या 24 वायलेशन है, तो वो सेपरेट चल रहा है, ED का सेपरेट चल रहा है. तो माय पॉइंट वाज, सर, वी शुड रेज दिस पॉइंट कि ED का ये जुरिडिक्शन वहां पे आपको कन्विक्ट हो जाए तो आपको ये करना चाहिए, बट यहाँ तो हम लोग देखते हैं कि पैरेलली चलाता है सर. What is your, Das Saab has been there, what is your take on this, Das Saab? आप तो
you have summed up correctly. ED, because of the definition of offense of money laundering, ED has been placed as if it is a parallel investigating agency. Because if you compare with the anti-money laundering law that FinCEN is handling in the US or the FIU, the UK is handling, there the crime money itself does not become proceeds of crime if for the purpose of money laundering. Only when it is placed, they try to make dirty money clean, then only the offense is committed in those countries. Our country has gone a step further. We had amended our law in such a manner that the moment somebody commits a murder and obtains some profits out of it, he will be said to have committed the offense of money laundering. And money laundering under the law, once offense is committed, ED claims that it can stand on its own, though they will get jurisdiction only after a scheduled crime is committed. But once that is committed, the money laundering offense can stand on its own, that is the claim. And so far, we do not have a clarity on that because of the position of the law as it stands.
So there is nothing
That is
to
why
challenge in the,
you have said,
so nobody has
Tell
challenged it
me.
constitutionally in the Supreme Court till now?
not now, not so far. In fact, there is a need that we should persuade the lawmakers, everybody, that the ED should not become another competing law enforcement agency to CBI, police, and multiple, like even for the purpose of kidney racket. The moment kidney racket case is made, the doctor is arrested by the ED as well. The only day before, only a few weeks before, this Tabligh Jamaat chief was one case was filed by Delhi Police Crime Branch. Once FIR was filed, the ED also started, because there is a case of foreign money coming in and all these things. They also filed a case of money laundering and did it almost simultaneously. That bugs me. My point is, as is your point, is that ED should not, must not become a competing law enforcement agency for other IPC or other offences. Like it should not become a parallel to CBI, a parallel to Narcotics Bureau, a parallel to any other agency.
So the
They
legal,
should only, yes.
the legal paradox is, if the original jurisdiction case fails in the court of law, ultimately in High Court or Supreme Court after 5 years or 10 years or 12 years, by that time ED has already done the damage by attaching and confiscating and doing whatever they want. Then how do you return it to the accused person?
You do not know that for that law does not, whatever is the laws, no, the state does not give you any compensation that is provided in the law, anti-money laundering law.
Because if CBI says
It's a paradox.
and ED
It's a
fixes
paradox.
you. It's a paradox.
It is like a bhasmasur that we have made, and that is why it is a draconian, and there is a need. As the law evolves, certain improvements are required to be made, and this is one requirement we foresee that is required to be made, that the money laundering offense in its broadest term as it is defined needs to be properly defined, so that it becomes only laundering offense becomes the baby of ED and not the principal offense.
And so whatever the government's intentions be, sir, the people like you here, I think we should take it up. There shouldn't be paradox in the law. I mean, nobody has an answer to whoever people I have spoken. There is no answer to this paradox. Nobody has even challenged it.
May I pitch in here for, may I pitch in for a second here?
Sir.
Yes.
Actually, this is the most burning issue, most troubling issue, Banjara Sahib, which you are raising. And that is why, if you remember, during my deliberation, I said the moment attachment order is confirmed by the adjudicating authority. The solution to your problem, I am telling. The moment adjudicating authority order is confirmed of provisional attachment, then the power has been given to the ED to take the possession forthwith. That is the only problem which is there in the act. I mean, the major problem in the act. Otherwise, under Benami law, the moment attachment order is confirmed by the adjudicating authority, the power is not there to take forthwith possession. Then one has to wait for the appeal. So till at least when the appeal is decided, at least some judicial application of mind is done. Before that judicial application of mind is done, not done, neither by the enforcement agency nor by the adjudicating authority. So at least a person would say, after a judicial application of mind only my asset has gone. So merely by reflecting this only, this also, that possession should not go to the enforcement directorate. Matter should be kept pending. And I think some relief will be given even by doing this much, and not as much as you are saying. Even if that much cannot be achieved, this much is also given.
No,
I
but
think
it is very logical, sir. The initiating authority first should confirm the crime, then you attach whatever you want to attach. If the CBI acquits you and the PMLA convicts you.
There is a reasoning. No, sir, there is a reasoning. Section 5, they are not adhering to the Section 5. Section 5 says where the enforcement directorate is of the opinion that the asset is likely to be alienated or transferred. So power is given to safeguard. Suppose there is a person who is international smuggler. So he has got some assets over here. So if in case some complaint is filed against him in criminal court of law or by some other agency, he has some assets. If those assets are not attached, maybe he disposes those assets.
So they can do provisional attachment till the time the other agency is clearing it. Why should they go to confiscation stage?
That is why I am saying only attachment should be done, confiscation should not be done. That is what precisely I am saying, sir. So to that extent also, if the amendment is brought out, this harshness can be removed. That is what I am presenting. You have touched the right issue. The solution, at least this is the minimum solution, if not much. This is the minimum which the government should.
And it's a very professional thing. We are not saying that you dilute the law, but you remove the legal paradox. Another thing about this burden of proofs between 24A and B, 24A may the word is shall and 24B may the word is may.
No, it's because of the other person.
And that is the other person. Sir, so basic constitutionally to challenge hoga. How can you be asked to prove your innocence, sir?
In fact, 24A was rendered in this concept that in case two things are proved against you, third will be presumed. To that extent, there could be some sound reasoning. Law never intended that even first two things will be presumed. So the problem is in the implementation. They are presuming the first two things also. That is where the problem is.
So therefore the law has to be clear. You have got a favorable decision in 3 courts and one adverse in 1 court. But the law should be clear now, because unnecessary this is creating a paradox.
Yes.
The law is clear. Law is clear to you. Law is clear to me. ED is usurping and trying to use it a little proactively, and the courts will obviously, whenever a matter will come before them, they will give that judgment. But as you correctly said, there are certain areas, as it is a new law, and we in ED, we find ED is super active, and they are, instead of really going by the books and having protocols, they are jumping in everything, and in the process, they are becoming not too efficient also in the process. If we
दास साहब आपने वो जो एक बार हसन अली का वाला कहा ना कि उसमें कंटिन्यूइंग ऑफेंस डजंट ये जस्ट कुडंट फॉलो इट प्रॉपर्ली, एक बार से थोड़ा सा
समझा देता हूं।
हसन अली वाला,
हसन अली केस में क्या हुआ था, बॉम्बे हाई कोर्ट का ऑर्डर 2012 का है। इसमें क्या हुआ था, the offense of scheduled offense was committed before the money laundering law came into existence.
Now I got it. Before 2005. So
that they took this plea. They told that भैया ये हम लोग का scheduled offense तो पुराना है. So how can you do it? They told it is a continuing offense.
So this crime was prior to 2005.
Prior to 2002. So then 2005. You are correct. Then ED lawyers told that it is a continuing offense. the Bombay High Court told, no, it is not a continuing offense in this particular case.
In this
The
particular.
reason is
Agreed.
simple.
Yeah.
Though
Agreed.
they committed scheduled offense and proceeds of a crime was lying, the moment proceeds of a crime was placed in Swiss bank, it became the offense of a money laundering was committed. By that time, the law has come into force. So that is how, and they told clearly that the such receipt has, yes, then they told that since with that act, the offense was committed and nothing further continuing offense continues in this case. Hassan Ali is a peculiar case. In all similar cases, those who might have committed some scheduled crime before
2005, and the
before
procedure.
2005, and their monies are introduced or come to the fore now, sought to be regularized, then that will also suffer similar fate. And mind you, from my experience, I have seen largest number of money laundering cases have a Calcutta links.
Had
Calcutta links.
Calcutta link.
Calcutta links.
Oh. Sir, infamous कर देंगे sir आप कलकत्ता को.
Even if he is in Ahmedabad, even if he is in Bombay, even if he is in Ranchi, even if he is in Delhi, the check has come from Calcutta.
तनेजा
Okay.
साहब ये कलकत्ता ले आए तो बिफोर इवन और कोई हो या कंक्लूड करे 2 मिनट थोड़ा वो
एक क्वेश्चन भी आया मिस्टर आशीष
11 नंबर
पेंडिंग है
11
chat box में question pending है. Dash sir can also answer if desired. There is one question pending in chat box from Mr. Ashish Rostagi.
The same question, I think Taneja sir has already clarified that if we put the ant into the ink, then wherever the ant will travel, will.
Yes, yes. The same reason.
That's sir, please.
Last
I-
question.
I can't see anything.
The question is, sir,
642.
I wanted to understand if someone does smuggling and earns money, it buys property out of this smuggling money, so this property can be seized. However, out of the income earned out of property, he acquires shares. What is the status of the shares?
Can't follow. Tell me. Well,
Sir, the question is, the person has had a smuggle something. From the smuggling money, they purchase the property. Out of the income of the property, they have purchased the shares. So property can be confiscated, but the income of the property can be used for shares. What will be the fate of the shares?
Same thing. Not only trees, fruits also. Everything.
आशीष रस्तोगी जी को लग रहा है शायद डैश साहब कुछ और बता दें तो शायद
If that property he has sold and bought something still bigger, everything will go with that. What he told that ant with the color of this thing, wherever it goes, that is tented. That will not. But in US and UK, there is provision that out of those proceeds of a crime, whatever is available will be attached and confiscated. However, in India, there is no such provision. They would like to catch whatever is the proceeds of a crime. That's it.
The RD Kakraji is there. Yes, raise his hands again if you would like to say something.
So thank you very much.
तो आई थिंक
Yeah, 1 second. आदि काकरा जी, आपका कोई क्वेश्चन था, उनको
विवेक।
म्यूट कर दीजिए.
विवेक
हाँ,
हो जाएगा तो हम भी एक बार थोड़ा
हाँ,
सा
एकदम भैया.
अरुण सिंघानिया जी का क्वेश्चन आया सर, ये ले लेते हैं लास्ट क्वेश्चन. अरुण सिंघानिया जी का क्वेश्चन आया है.
हेलो
काकरा जी बोलिए. काकरा जी
हाँ
बोलिए.
जी आज का जो सब्जेक्ट है बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है और इसके लिए दास साहब और तनीजा साहब जो है उनका तहे दिल से मैं आभार जनाता DTPA की ओर से कर रहे हैं। आपने इस कॉम्प्लेक्स सब्जेक्ट को इतने सरल भाषा के अंदर में समझा दिया सबको। लेकिन मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है, मेरे एक SSC है, उसका सिविल भी मैं देखता हूँ, क्रिमिनल भी देखता हूँ, CBI भी देखता हूँ, टैक्स इनकम टैक्स भी देखता हूँ। तो चीज ऐसी है कि उसके 2010 के अंदर में रेड हुई, सर्च हुई CBI ने, और उसके बाद में वो अभी तक क्रिमिनल FIR हो गया PMLA के अंदर में, अभी तक उसको एक तरह से चार्जशीट नहीं दिया गया है। तो उसकी फैमिली के जो अदर मेंबर्स हैं, वाइफ वगैरह, जो क्या वो इस ऐसे विवाद से विश्वास में जा सकते हैं? हेलो
हाँ सब
हेलो
आ गया।
It is a little complex unless I know that, you see, Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, they have given very elaborate FAQs. One time my Undersecretary Kamlesh is now handling that as he has become Joint Secretary. So I had a long talk with him. He said, विवाद से विश्वास जो है आज it is framed does not give you any iota of any relief from any other act or any immunity under any other provision. It gives you only settles the dispute pending. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
काकरा साहब का क्वेश्चन शायद ये है कि क्या कोई प्रोहिबिशन है जाने में, वो शायद बेनिफिट की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं। प्रोबब्ली ही इज आस्किंग कि उनको कोई एम्बार्गो तो नहीं है, क्योंकि उसमें शायद ये एम्बार्गो है।
If there is no embargo under the ये विवाद से विश्वास की स्कीम के अंदर जो 4-5 एम्बार्गो है, that it should not be a search case or it should not be a money laundering case, it is something like that. So if there is nothing, and also it is the case of relatives in whose name there would not be anything, presuming that I say they are eligible. If you want specifically, take my phone number, talk to me. I'll get it checked from Kamlesh and let you know.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Geda ji.
Last question is from Arun Singhania ji. Before we move
one question from Banjara ji.
That vote of thanks. So
Thank you.
Arun Singhania ji has the same question, that where the power of seizure are already available under the original offences or the original act. Why this again means dual power with the PMLA? So I think Das Sahab has already answered.
Banjara ji, last question.
Banjara ji, before vote of thanks.
Banjara ji.
तनेजा साहब
है सुन दे सर।
यारा जी, आपके क्वेश्चन पे आपको हमें एक्स्ट्रा कप ऑफ टी पिलानी पड़ेगी, आपको कॉफी।
सर आपका सुंदर टाइम लिया है तो थोड़ा सबको बेनिफिट तो हो सर।
नहीं अच्छा है, अच्छा, वी आर एंजॉयिंग इट, वी आर एंजॉयिंग।
सर ये हम कह रहे थे जो शेड्यूल ऑफ ऑफेंस में 11 नंबर है और 29 नंबर जो 447 फ्रॉड का आया है ना, 11 नंबर वाज 12 and 24 ऑफ सेबी। और ये वो आया है कीपिंग इन माइंड दैट LTCG पेनी स्टॉक का प्रॉफिट, क्योंकि इन्होंने कलकत्ता को तो नाम दे दिया दास साहब ने ऑलरेडी कि तो जब कलकत्ता दास साहब ले आए सर, मैं थोड़ा हचकचा रहा था कि क्यों अपने पे हम लोग खराब करें सर, बट जब ले आए तो 12/24 का थोड़ा इंपॉर्टेंस समझा दीजिए vis-a-vis PMLA। और 447 भी जो आया है सर कमीज एक्ट का फ्रॉड वाला, तो हाउ डेडली इट कुड बी यूज्ड अगेंस्ट द कंपनी, अगेंस्ट द ऑफिसर्स, अगेंस्ट द ऑडिटर्स, अगेंस्ट ऑल ऑफ अस बाय PMLA। 2 मिनट इसका समझा दीजिए सर, जब कलकत्ता आएगी तो काइंडली।
आप तो you have told everything. You have told everything because this is something that ED is only when something like this comes, ED will jump on you. They are ready to jump on you. And they have strengthened the Calcutta wing during the last 3 years. their Calcutta wing they have strengthened during last 3 years. And SEBI, you see, SEBI has been was proactive and has not been for the last couple of years. But the moment a matter comes more than the SEBI, one can expect a very vigorous action on the part of ED. And it is, see, while we say that ED's money laundering should be for offenses like narcotics, smuggling, and bigger offenses as it happens in other countries. In our country, for where there is separate wings are available, even for Prevention of Corruption Act, for kidney rackets, for bank frauds, ED is hastening to take up these cases, burdening themselves, diluting their efficiency. On the one hand, they are saying we are working with 50% of our strength. On the other hand, they are putting their fingers in all pies. And I made an analysis to find that their seizure, despite all these activities, the seizure amount per case, because they are taking for many cases, is not very substantial. Till about 2018, it was hardly about 2 crores per case, which is nothing. So basically, there is a need that ED itself should introspect, government should introspect, all of us who are professionals should also voice and suggest to government that what is money laundering is certainly a very bad thing and it should be tackled at all levels. Otherwise, our country's sovereignty will be affected. So that is true, but this is not the way. In this way, money laundering offense is not addressed appropriately. That is the feeling of somebody like me who is associated with it and want that it should be strengthened.
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
Thank you.
Taneja ji, you have any closing remarks on that?
एक चीज लास्ट में मैं ऐड करूं, बंजारा साहब, आपने जो फ्रॉड की बात कही, यहाँ पर जो फ्रॉड की डेफिनेशन दी है वो बहुत गड़बड़ हो गई है कंपनीज एक्ट में, और इसमें जो जेन्युइन एक्टिविटीज हैं कैरिड आउट इन डे टू डे बाय सर्टेन एग्जीक्यूटिव्स इन द कंपनी, दैट I mean the very serious situation is going on. I think government must out for 47. Many
That's
people
right.
are going to suffer because उसमें भी बेलेबल नहीं है. PMLA में भी पहले यही था, बेलेबल नहीं है. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने क्लैरिफाई किया, वहां अभी प्रॉब्लम चल रही है. Many people have been arrested by SFIO, उसको बेल भी ग्रांट नहीं हुई, बेल भी रिफ्यूज हो गई, तो अननेसेसरीली कुछ लोग उसमें ड्रैग हो गए हैं क्योंकि स्ट्रिक्टली स्पीकिंग वर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द फ्रॉडुलेंट एक्टिविटीज.
अगर उसमें से छूटेंगे तो भी PMLA में चले जाएंगे.
यस, और अब PMLA और ऊपर से शुरू हो जाएगा.
Very right.
Thank you, Giridhar Dalia ji for coordinating the question and answer session, and thank you, Taneja ji and Das sir for taking wonderful 2-hour session today. I request our convener Tarun Kumar Gupta ji to give the official vote of thanks, a formal vote of thanks. Tarun bhaiya.
Yeah, I on behalf of the 3 institutions organizing this webinar, ACAE, DTPA, and Central Kolkata Chartered Accountant Study Circle, thank both Mr. Dash, Aryan Dash, and Mr. Taneja for sharing their thoughts, insightful thoughts on the complex subject. जैसे R.D. Kakra जी ने बोला, it is such a complex subject, and जैसे जिस लेवल के questions जिनेश बंजारा जी हमारे past president पूछ रहे थे, मतलब इससे समझ में आता है कि कितना complex subject है. बट तनेजा सर ने और डैश सर ने इतना इजीली और इतना ग्रेसफुली सब्जेक्ट को टैकल किया, एंड हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स के जितने भी क्वेश्चंस थे, सर आप दोनों ने इतने अच्छे से इनको लिया, स्पेशली मिस्टर डैश हु रिवील्ड दैट ही इज अ स्टॉलवर्ट इन दिस एक्ट, एंड उन्होंने ये सब्जेक्ट में काम कर रहे जब से ये एक्ट आया भी नहीं था, तब से सर काम कर रहे हैं सर. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and giving us your precious time. And Taneja sir also, thanks to you for sharing your thoughts and giving your precious time. I also thank all the participants who have come and joined and shared their questions and thoughts and listened to our learned speakers, because without the participants, the webinar would not have been possible. Thank you so much, all of you. I will now end my vote of thanks and over to you, Vivek. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the speakers, to the delegates, and to the associations who partnered with us for this wonderful 2-day session. And we are thankful to everyone. And let's move forward and have more sessions like this over Zoom. And friends, do join us tomorrow 11 o'clock for a session, motivational session by Ajay Agarwal ji. Thank you, everyone. We are ending the meeting over here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.